as an editor, and I really enjoyed editing, and it really sort of built my fundamental concepts about content. But I then formed my own production company with my partner, who's actually in the second row. We have a company called Show Force based in New York. We do a lot of different things in our company. The cornerstone of our company is large event television series. And I've been doing television series programming for a long time. I start by saying it's called Frontier House, not Pioneer House, because I produced and directed that series with a British company called Wall to Wall, which was actually a very successful co-production. Frontier House was the American version of that series, which began with 1900 House, went on to Frontier House, Colonial House, and the wonderful British counterparts, which also aired in the United States, Edwardian House, which was called Manor House. Those kinds of shows did extremely well on PBS, which were a way of reinterpreting history, of talking about history, but in a more hands-on, character-driven way. And I still find in our shows at Show Force, we have an ongoing relationship with PBS, and I've been involved with the network for many years. I began by producing individual one-off shows, some of which went into strands like American Masters or other existing PBS strands, Frontline. And then I moved into the larger series model, which is a partnership between PBS and CPB, which is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is a government-funded funding arm through the Public Broadcasting Service. So, in fact, the majority of the funding from our shows comes through the system itself, and then we do co-production deals or simply international sales and acquisitions on these larger series. And it is in fact the larger series in our company that allows us to do individual films that we really love and believe in, and a lot of those are sort of funded and created and are allowed to exist by the resources and revenues that come from series, which is the core of the company's work. And I think it's quite hard in America not to have series as the cornerstone of your company, because it's the primary thing that the broadcasters in the United States are interested in. And I was a broadcaster from 2002 to 2005 at AETN, A&E Television and the History Channel, where we at that time was the rebrand of that network, and they actually brought a number of producers to be part of that team to really look at the programming and to change the face of that network. To some people's feeling, it's not at all what it was in the past, but it was actually, as a producer, it was an incredibly valuable thing for me to have done, because getting into the other chair and really thinking about what works on television and how the audience was reviewing was actually a gift, so that when I returned into the world of producing, it really changed how I thought and the kind of shows that came out of our company. So I think I can speak to sort of a lot of different places in terms of how you sort of skin a cat. I also am the founder and chairman of the MFA program in social documentary at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, which is a very brand new program with 23 graduate students focusing specifically on social documentary, which has been really exciting, and we have students from all around the world at the program. We have 23 in total, and 6 of them are international students. So that has actually been a great reviver in my spirit of documentary, having spent now so much time in this sort of high, very very costly world of series television, to go back and work with my students on very story-driven social documentaries from around the world. So I'm sort of keeping my feet into all of the ponds that I can, because I really, really love documentary and how it can make you think about the world in general.
So from coming out of the Sheffield Festival, I mean, this is really the right question to ask you. What's the state of the union of the documentary world as you see it?
Yeah, we just finished our festival a couple of weeks ago, and surprisingly we had the most successful Sheffield Festival that we've ever had. So we had a lot more industry delegates and we had a lot more buyers at the festival. So somehow we sort of went against the international trend. I think a lot of it is to do with the changes that we've introduced in Sheffield in the last few years. What we've developed in Sheffield is an event that is a film festival, but it's also a conference and a marketplace. But we have always tried to make sure that it's a very boutique experience for everybody who comes. So I think one of the biggest things to think about when you're setting out as a producer is that you have to think beyond your films and beyond your ideas, because one of the major things to focus on in order to survive in the industry is about building relationships and building an understanding of what everybody is doing out there. So I always say to people, it's not a good idea to pitch to a commissioning editor unless you've actually watched some of the films that they commissioned before. And one way of doing that is to go to events like Sheffield and Hot Docs in Toronto and Silver Docs and Rose Green. There's a lot, in Sheffield and Edinburgh and Amsterdam. There's a whole lot of events that happen on the world tour of documentary events, and it's probably best to focus on the ones that have a very strong industry focus, because that's where you're going to make really good relationships with other producers and also with the commissioning editors. And don't forget the distributors and all sorts of other people in the industry. So what we had this year in Sheffield was 1,860 industry delegates and around about 200 buyers, 190 buyers. So the ratio in Sheffield is like one decision maker, if it's a distributor or a commissioner, one decision maker for maybe 9 or 10 producers. And that's a really great ratio for meeting people. If you do the maths on some of the other bigger ones, it's about one decision maker to about 40 producers. And if you can imagine a mother bird feeding 40 babies with one worm, it's a bit better to go somewhere where you might only have 10 other babies in the nest. So the other thing that we've been doing in Sheffield is focusing very strongly on new media and the digital landscape. And we started running something called Crossover Labs 7 years ago. It's a very successful program around the world now. We've been doing Crossover Labs in Canada, the UK, Australia, Sweden, Italy. What we do is we take filmmakers, sometimes documentaries, sometimes science, sometimes drama. We take filmmakers, and also we take games producers and new media producers, and take them away for 5 days to do a very intensive training about how to think about your audience in a new way. It's exactly what Norm's talking about. We put the citizen at the absolute centre of your thinking